Hi there, welcome to the Robot Program. I'm Professor E. In this episode, I'm going to show you how to bring your 3D printed Shelly robot to life using the components of our starter kit. The tools that you'll need to do this are a number 0 Phillips screwdriver and a little bit of sticky tape, double-sided sticky tape. The first step is to load our Easy Builder software to see the building instructions. I'm going to skip the robot course and go into the Example Projects tab of the Bookmarks menu. And if you scroll down, you'll see the Robot Program Shelly Example Project. Click Open. And it says Open Assembly Instructions. Click Yes. These are the instructions to build our Shelly robot. We're going to start with the bottom chassis piece. Now I'm building the Farscape version of the Shelly robot. I really like the TV series, so this is inspired by the show. So your Shelly might look a little bit different if you designed a different shell. So starting with my bottom chassis, the front is where the camera fits in, so the little square at the bottom. And all of my components are just going to connect with a pressure fit system. So we're just going to clip them right into place with a couple of screws. If I click Next, I'm going to add the Edu-Tech robot controller. And this is one of the components that's actually going to use screws. So I've got 4 screw holes here. And my screws are actually contained in these little accessory bags. So I'm going to shake out some of my pieces here, and I'm looking for silver screws. I'm going to need 3 of them to connect the Edu-Tech board. And I'm just going to put all my pieces back in the bag, and I can save these for a different robot project. So I want to take a look at how the Edu-Tech goes into the bottom chassis. So I can take a look at the top view, and I see that the connector of the board is going towards the speaker output. So make sure we've got that oriented correctly. And I'm going to put screws in the 2 forwardmost screw holes and 1 in the bottom left. I'm not going to put one in the bottom right because that's closer to the Wi-Fi antenna. And it's not a great electronics practice to put metal near there. So I'm going to skip that one. I already have the holes in my 3D print. So I'm just going to place the screws in place here. And then I'll take my screwdriver and secure them in. If the screw is a little bit stuck because it's having a hard time going through that plastic, just use a little bit more elbow grease. Just until the screw is snug. You can go ahead and check and make sure all the screws are nice and snug, not too tight, just until the board is secured. Perfect. All right, Edu-Tech in place. Now next step is to add our camera. This is the same camera as our Revolution robot, so you might have seen it before inside of a housing. This is the same camera, just outside. So we're going to take off the little sticker on the front. So now our camera is exposed. And I'm going to put the bottom part, so this part with the cable is what's going to go on the bottom of the chassis, secure it down in front. So to do that, I'm going to use a little bit of double-sided tape just along the bottom of the cable. Just to hold it in place. It fits pretty well with the pressure fit. This is just a little extra security. Cool, super sticky tape. Okay. So I'm going to fit that into, let's put my tape in first actually. You can go either way. There we go. Tape on the chassis, and now fit in my camera. Just press it into place. So the top part of the camera should be coming out over the robot. So it's not on the bottom side, it's on the top side. All right, now I'm going to take my camera cable here and plug it into the connection that says camera. All of these connections use male to female connections. So that means we have one side with pins and one side with a socket that fits inside. go, make sure we've got it the right way around. And we just click into place. Perfect. There we go. Now you can see there is a little grid here, and that's where the speaker is going to output the audio from. So we're going to hear our robot through that speaker hole. You can put the speaker in either before the camera. I like to do it after the camera, just because then I've already got my camera cable inside. So this is my speaker right here, and I'm going to peel off the sticker on the back. And this is just like double-sided sticky tape for the speaker. And we're going to connect it to the bottom left-hand side of the Iotiny board where it actually says speaker. And the red wire is going to go on the right-hand side. I'm going to slide that connection over the pins, wiggle it into place, never pulling on the wires. We always want to use the actual connection. And then I can press my sticky side of my speaker right into the 3D printed hole. Fits right into place. There we go. So now we have our speaker and we have our camera. And these are examples of how we're going to get information in and out of the board. So the camera is an example of a computer peripheral, and that brings us input information into the board that we can then process. All right, next step is we're going to add one of our wheels. And again, I like to take a look at the top view here. We're going to add our left wheel. You'll have two continuous servos with wheels, and these are a type of servo that go in 360 degrees. That's why they control the wheel. So the motion just keeps going. And their servos are just motors where we can control the positioning. So this is a special type of continuous rotation servo motor. All right, so we can see it's not quite centered. It's not in the middle of the servo, so it matters which direction we put the servos into the slots here. So I want my cables to be pointing towards the front of the robot. So I'm going to slide my servo, wiggle it into place, snap it down so that the wheels line up with the holes in the bottom of the chassis. I'm going to leave my connection for now. Before we can secure the servo with our brackets, we'll need to put in the right wheel. You'll notice that these servos say HDD. That stands for Heavy Duty Digital. So once again, I want my cables pointing towards the front, and I'm going to secure this servo into place. Make sure my wheel comes through my base. Good. Cable toward the front. Perfect. All right, so now I'm going to need 4 screws to secure the servos into place. So in my other accessories bag here, I'm going to look for the same silver screws, and I need 2 for each wheel. Putting the rest of the pieces aside for a future project. Okay, so when I printed my shell and my bottom chassis, I also printed the brackets for the servos. And these brackets are going to go across the side connections of both the servos. Actually, let's do the front one first. So it fits right over top, and it's pretty snug already, but we're going to use the screws for just a little bit of extra security. Look at that. I made it go off anyway. There we go. So the screws will line up over top if you want to get started a little bit with your fingers just to get it going. Good. Get my Phillips again here. A little bit of elbow grease through the plastic. Oh, there we go, right into the holes. No problem. And I'm going to repeat that for all 4 of these holes. Okay. All 4 screws are in place, so I've got 2 brackets securing my 2 servos. Now I'm going to connect my servos. And if you want to see the pins where I'm going to connect in the Iotiny, let's click back for a second. And you can see that the left wheel is going to D0. So these are the pins on the Iotiny, and they're labeled down the side, D0 all the way through D7. So I'm going to take my left wheel, and I want to make sure I'm lining up the colors of the cable with the color of the pins. So the black wire is going to line up with the black pin of D0. So D0 is my top one. I'm going to secure that into a place. Again, not holding the wires, always use the connector to put it in place. And then I'm going to add D1 underneath D0. Now my camera has come off in the meantime, so I am going to add some more sticky tape. If you find your camera is coming off, you can also use a little bit of hot glue. Just put it on the plastic and the bottom of the connector. And I always like to use low temp hot glue, just because it's a little bit easier to work with, even if you have to go a little bit quickly. So add some more tape here. And press my camera securely into place. Put my cable down a bit here. All right. I've got everything in place. I did D0, I did D1. Next step, my battery holder. So my 3D printed robot here runs on 6 AA batteries. I like to use rechargeable batteries because then I can use my robot over and over and over again. So I'm just going to bring up 6 batteries here. And I've already charged these. And if you have a little bit of trouble getting these out of the battery holder to charge them, you can actually use your screwdriver to gently pry them out of place. But make sure that your robot is not turned on, so nothing's connected. So I have to put my batteries into the holder first because some of them are going to go on the bottom. So I've got a bit of a sticky one here, so if I want to use my screwdriver to just move my battery holder pieces over a bit, snap it into place. All right, flip it over, do the other side. And once again, I'm going to use my screwdriver. There we go. All right, all 6 batteries are in the holder. Now I've got my positive and negative connections here. So I'm going to have them come out the left side of the robot. And that's because there's a channel to actually feed the wires through. This is so they don't get caught in my wheels as my servos are turning. So I'm going to click this into place. There we go. And I'm going to run these wires through the channel to the front of the robot. There we go, out the other side. Just going to rotate my robot for a second. Now, to connect these wires to the Edu-Tech, I'm actually going to use the alternate power adapter. So I've got this little connector here that fits into the Edu-Tech, and there's 2 different connections in this adapter. I've got the positive and the negative. Then I have these little screws on top and these connections down here. I want to put the red wire into the connector that lines up with the positive and the black wire into the connector that lines up with the negative. And then I'm going to use my Phillips screwdriver to secure those into place. It's actually going to move this connection here down to be a nice, solid, secure connection. So let's actually, I'll do the black one first because it's on the inside. So put it into the negative, push it all the way through. And if you need a little bit more wire, you can strip the wires with some wire strippers. And I'm going to screw this down into place. You don't have to go too far, just until the wire doesn't come out anymore. Oh, so that one wasn't enough, so I'm going to have to go even further for this one. So keep going. Oh, there we go, until it's nice and snug. And now this wire is not going to come out. Same thing with the positive. I'm going to put it all the way in. And I'm going to turn that screw all the way down. Check both my connections. Okay, we're good to go here. I'm not going to plug it in yet because I still have one more piece to connect. And if you're like me and you've disturbed all your connections as you were working, just put your speaker down into place again. Put your camera into place again, whatever you need to do. There we go. So last but not least, we're going to add our shell and any other components that might connect to the board. Maybe you got really creative and you have extra servos or you have extra lights. Now's your chance to connect those. My connections are going to be the 2 LEDs. And I've got a black and white wire for each of them. And you'll notice there's a gap in between. So just like the servos, I've got 3 pins with a black and a white and no wire in the middle. I want to line those up with the Edu-Tiny pins the same way I lined up the servos. So if I click next in my instructions, you'll see that it says to add the top shell, but it also says connect left LED to digital port D2 and right LED to digital port D3. So it doesn't matter which LED is which eyeball or which antenna. I'm going to connect one of them to D2. What does matter is that I've got the black lined up with the black and the white lined up with the white. Sliding them into place again, wiggle them in, not holding on to the cables. And then I'll do my other one for D3. Okay. So there we go. I've got my 2 different eyeballs. So I'm going to make sure my left is coming out here, my right's coming out here. And these LEDs are going to fit up through the holes of the shell. You got to wiggle them up a little bit. There we go. Okay, so I've got one up here. And I'm going to put one up here. There we go. Now, before I secure my shell and turn on my Edu-Tiny, my lights are kind of floppy here. I can leave them this way, or I can keep them short and I can bundle up my wires in here and just have little teeny tiny lights coming out of the top of the shell. But as you can see from my robot over here, I like to use pipe cleaners to make them a little bit stiffer. So I have 2 pink pipe cleaners that I'm going to turn into a little bit of reinforcement for these LEDs. You can either wrap your pipe cleaners up from the bottom before you put the lights through, or you can start from the top and cut them off, tuck them down, whatever you want to do. So I actually like to give a little bit of pipe cleaner, and I wrap it around the top first, and then I take the other side and wind it all the way down my wires. And I can just go loose or I can go tight, whatever you want your robot to look like. Okay. So you can keep winding all the way down the wires. You can cut them off, or I'm actually going to create little spirals here at the base of this robot. A little bit different than that one. That one I put the wires all the way through with the pipe cleaners. There we go. And if I want it to be a little bit stiffer, I just wind more tightly with my pipe cleaner. So I've got more wire for support. Same thing on this side. Start with a little bit of pipe cleaner, and then go the other side. Good. And then once again, I'm going to wind them around the bottom. I could cut these off. I could make them even longer and wind them together. I could do all sorts of things. It's my robot to invent whatever I want. There we go. So when I'm ready to turn on my Shelly, I just add the power adapter to the Edu-Tiny board, plug it in, and fit my shell down over top. Fix my antenna, and my Shelly robot is complete. Now remember, when you're done using your Shelly robot, you want to make sure you unplug the the Iotiny or take out some of the batteries. I actually like to do both so that I'm really sure the robot is no longer on. And there we go. We've built a 3D printed robot using the components of the Shelly kit. In this episode, we put components into our 3D printed robot that will allow us to bring it to life. To build your robot, you'll need a number 0 Phillips screwdriver and double-sided sticky tape or hot glue. Begin by securing the Iotiny robot controller using only 3 screws. We want to avoid placing metal near the Wi-Fi antenna. Secure the speaker with the double-sided sticky tape already on the speaker and connect it to the board. All of the connections use male to female connections, which means there are a pin and a socket within the cable connections. Add the camera using double-sided sticky tape or hot glue to the front of the robot. Connect it to the camera port on the Iotiny. A camera is an example of a peripheral that provides information to the robot that can be then processed or programmed depending on what you want to do with your robot. Next, secure the 2 360 HDD servos with wheels on the left and right-hand sides of the robot. The 2 3D printed brackets can be used to secure them in place. Connect the left servo to D0 and the right servo to D1 on the Iotiny board. Remember to line up the black wire on the black side of the pins. The battery holder takes 6 AA batteries. We recommend using rechargeable batteries for endless hours of robot enjoyment. Feed the wires through the battery channel all the way to the front of the robot. Insert the red wire into the positive side of the alternate adapter and insert the black wire into the negative side. Use your screwdriver to secure those connections into place. Connect the left LED to D2 and the right LED to D3. Feed the LEDs up through the robot shell, and then you'll have lights or antenna or whatever you want to create for your robot. You can organize your cables with twist ties or by placing them exactly where you want them before you secure the shell into place. When you're ready to turn on your robot, you'll need to lift the shell and plug in the adapter to the Iotiny. When you're finished, remember to unplug the Iotiny, and I recommend removing a battery so that you know your robot is turned off. Your 3D printed robot is all built. Thanks for watching this episode, and we'll see you next time. The cables in this kit use what type of connection? What is the label of the first digital port? What is a peripheral device? Find the answers at therobotprogram.com.